listening to Rescue Community Church. For more information, check us out at www.rescue.cc.
All right, so can anybody tell me, if you've been here the past couple weeks, you can yell it out. Can anybody tell me who we've been talking about the past couple weeks? Anybody know? Oh, thank you. I was going to have to say, it rhymes with Shmebraham is what I was going to say. In case, I always do that to my kids. They're like, that's not a real word. I'm like, I know, but I'm just trying to tell you what it is without actually telling you what it is. So we've been talking about Abraham, and he is the father of the Israelite race, okay? And so we have been talking about him and his life, but we've been talking a lot about his flaws and his struggles and the things that he does and his mess-ups and all of those things. But what I find amazing is that God still, through all of his struggles, through all of his flaws, through all of his ridiculous behavior, his perpetual ridiculous behavior, God still chose to birth his nation through him. You know, sometimes I think that we think is once we become followers of Christ, that our struggles and our failures are over. How many know that that is not true? Anybody? Anybody know? Yes, raise those hands. As a matter of fact, I think that once you become saved, the struggle becomes more difficult. Anybody feel that way? I think it becomes more difficult. Why do you think that is? This is why. Because before, you don't have that moral compass to go by. Before you're saved, before you don't have to worry about the things that you're doing, because honestly, you don't even know that it's that big of a deal. So then when light is shed on it, here's the thing. I don't even think about what underneath my couch looks like. I'm going to be honest. I don't ever think about it. Well, let me tell you, when something goes under there and I have to go fetch it, I am a little nervous moving the couch. And when I open it and light comes to it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm horrified. So that I can't think about it. I have to move the couch. I have to clean everything under it. I have 3 children, and they're less than clean. We'll just leave it that. I don't know. Then I think to myself, how did this get under there? That's where every hair tie on the planet has gone. There's 1,000 hair ties or bobby pins. They're under the couch. If you are missing them, go look under your couch. Somehow they're there. Here's the thing. When light is brought to a place, then you see it for what it really is. So when you become saved, when you enter into a relationship with God, I think people assume that, wow, my life is going to be perfect. It's going to be easy. It absolutely is going to be better, but it's going to be hard. It's going to be harder. The struggle becomes real. In 2 Corinthians 5:17, this is what it says. There's a song that goes with it, but I won't sing it to you. It says, this means that anyone who belongs to Christ has become a new person. The old life is gone and the new life has begun. And then Paul says, he's writing a letter to the church in Galatians 5:17. This one's hard. It says, the sinful nature wants to do evil, which is just the opposite of what the Spirit wants. And the Spirit gives us desires that are opposite of what the sinful nature desires. These two forces are constantly fighting each other. Hello? No wonder it's a struggle. It's constantly a battle going on. So here's what I think. Why that if we know, today's message is called Cast All Aside. So if when we get saved, I think that it's easier to live in your old nature than it is your new nature. And I think the reason it's easier is because it's comfortable. Think about it. It's all you've known. Your whole life you've known the behaviors that you've had. It's habits. It's what you fall back on. And when something new comes along, it's so much harder to follow. Why? Because you don't know it yet. You don't know how to do it. I see this with my kids. My daughter is learning algebra, and she's like, what on earth is there letters for in math? I'm like, exactly. I don't know. It's stupid. You're never going to use this, is what I want to say to her in my head. You're not going to use this. This means nothing. Just get through it, is what I want to tell her. Here's the thing. She can multiply, divide, and add, and subtract, and all that stuff because she's been doing it for a long time. It's easy. She can rattle stuff off. But the new stuff, she has to put effort in. She has to take time to do it. She has to actually work at it. So it's easier then to fall back on what she already knows than to work hard at what's new. So today we're going to see how that fall comes into play for Abraham. The story is coming from Genesis 20. I'm not going to read it to you because honestly, I like to tell stories. I like to think of the Bible as a giant story or a movie. We talk about this all the time because our family loves movies. Love them, love them, love them. So these rainy days have been glorious, I tell you. I'm like, oh, darn, we can't go outside. Because if you know me too, I'm not an outdoorsy kind of girl. I could never go camping again in my whole life, and it would be great if I didn't have to go camping again. I went camping. Now, here's the thing. I've gone camping 2 times in my entire life. Once when I had a 9-month-old. No, she was a year old, and I was 6 months pregnant. And it was in the middle of July. It was awful. And I've gone another time. It was awful. I swore I'd never do it again. Let me just say this. That was 9 years ago that I went. And I swore I'd never go again. My children have been begging. And then Amy and Travis love camping. They're like, Beck, it's the greatest thing in the whole wide world. You should do it. And for years I've said, no, I shouldn't. It's awful. So this summer I decided to go with them, but they have a camper. So that's way different. It was air conditioned. I slept in a nice bed. It was great. I actually thoroughly enjoyed it. So I do have to say, I apologize for saying it's as terrible as it really is. So we're going to talk. I like stories. That's why I went on a rabbit trail. This has nothing to do, camping has nothing to do with today. So anyway, I'm going to tell you about Abraham. Well, we talked about how this guy went to Egypt. He told his wife, okay, we know about Abraham that he's supposed to birth the nation, but he is way old. Way, way old. In this story, he's 90 and his wife is 80. They have not had children yet. That's old. If you have, it's old. So here's the thing. We talked about last week that Abraham told his wife to go sleep with his servant so that they could have a baby. I can't even begin to tell you how stupid that is. You all know if you were a wife and you told your husband to go sleep with someone to have a baby, that would, if you even say that out loud, you should just go back to bed. You should start the day all over. So he does it. He listens to his wife. It causes a crazy mess. Then we hear that he goes to Egypt and he tells Pharaoh that his wife is his sister. So we're moving forward. This dingbat has not learned anything. He's a Fruit Loop dingus. He does not get what's going on. So here's the thing. He is coming again. He's going to Gerar, and there is a king. His king, it's King Abimelech. And so he's in Gerar, and this guy, the king, sees Sarah. Now apparently Sarah's like this beautiful, beautiful woman. Okay, I can't fully grasp all of this because she's 80. Older women are beautiful. I'm not saying older women are not beautiful, but this woman is so beautiful that her husband lies about her constantly. So again, what does he do? He tells the king that it's his sister and not his wife. All right. So if I'm Sarah, I'm at this point just wanting to punch him in the throat. Like, dude, have you not realized? Stop it. Just stop it. So the King Abimelech takes Sarah as his wife, and he's going to consummate the marriage. He falls asleep. So he goes into his bed. God comes to him and says this. All right, you ready? Oh, man. So then he says, it's in verse 4, it says, but Abimelech had not slept with her yet. So he said, so then God said, comes to him, he says, you are a dead man, for that woman you have taken is already married. So God comes to this guy, and he's like, what? Poor Abimelech doesn't even know what's going on. He thinks it's his sister, and he said, Lord, will you destroy an innocent nation? Didn't Abraham tell me she is my sister? And she herself said, yes, he is my brother. I acted in complete innocence. My hands are clean. Then God says to him, yes, I know you're innocent. That's why I kept you from sinning against me and why I did not let you touch her. Now return the woman to her husband, and he will pray for you, for he is a prophet. All right, so this guy lies. I'd be like, God, you should probably leave that last part out for right now. For he is a prophet, you should leave that part out because he is being not showing good colors today. So he goes to Abraham, and first of all, he is furious. Can you imagine how angry you'd be if you did something in innocence and then God shows up and says, I'm going to kill you if you touch her? I'd be angry at the person that told me the lie. So what is the takeaway from this story? We're going to finish the rest of the story. And so what's the takeaway? Well, here's the takeaway. Sin doesn't just affect you. When you sin, Abraham's sin of lying could have killed the king without the king even knowing it. The king didn't know. Not only that, you find out later in this story that because Abimelech took Sarah as his wife, that God made all of King Abimelech's other wives and all of the servants barren. None of them could have children. So, Abraham, his sin affected his actual wife, himself, a king, and all the women that were associated with King Abimelech. All of them. I think a lot of times in our life, we think that our choices only affect us. That's a lie. It affects everyone around you. So if it does that, why then do we do it? I think we do it because it's really hard to let go of this stuff in our lives. It's really hard to let go of the habits, the things that we've always known. Or I think a lot of times the reason that we don't turn from our sin is because we compartmentalize. Does everybody know what that means? I always think of those little, in the lunch boxes I have to put my son, none of his food can touch on his plate. So if he has chicken nuggets, the sauce has to be in a different dish. And I'm like, this is totally ridiculous. I'll give you a giant plate so nothing touches. He's like, no, I can't. Or if there's sauce on something, he has to have a different plate. And I'm like, my son has to compartmentalize his food. Here's the thing, we compartmentalize sin. We think, okay, well, we're not doing that. We're not doing what that person's doing. Or we go to church on Sunday morning. We are excited about God. We are excited about, doing small group. But then we go and we're doing things we shouldn't be doing during the week. Hello, boys. Nice to see you. We do things that we're not supposed to do. And we think, you know what? Just because I have gotten rid of all of these things in my life, I'm pretty good. I can just let that one go. I want to show you a picture. I don't think that when this video was made, they caught this picture. But I caught it a couple weeks ago. Look at when he says he's all in. Do you see something weird about that picture? What do you think? There's one left. I noticed it. He's a lawyer. No, I don't think he realized, and even in the video, but I think this picture is us. We say we give God everything. We say that we're all in, but we keep that one little thing back just in case, or it's too hard to give up all of it, or it's too big of a thing, or we can't do that. We can't possibly give God everything because what does that look like? We all struggle. And I think the saddest part of all is we all compare our sins. Well, I'm not doing what that lady's doing. Did you see what she's wearing? Did you see what she did? Did you see how she talks? Do you see who she's with? Or I'm not that guy. I don't have multiple girlfriends. I'm not cheating on my spouse. Newsflash, so what? So what? Who cares about their sin? There are sins in our own lives, in my life, that is keeping me from going all in with the Lord. So, just because you don't struggle with the big sins, just because maybe you're not shooting up heroin or smoking crack, or maybe you're not trafficking humans, that doesn't mean that you're better than others. You're still sinning and still struggling. So, if we all do that, what do we do? How do we go all in? So I think the first thing that we have to do to go all in, to cast everything aside, to give everything to God, is we have to name our sins. Ugh. Ugh. Feels, ugh. Honestly, I think you have to admit the sins in your life. That one sucks. It's hard. No one said it's going to be easy. No one said, I think one of the most beautiful things, if you have ever been to an Alcoholics Anonymous, or if you've ever been to narcotics, or if you've ever been to those support groups, I think the thing that I find the most refreshing is they say, hi, my name is Rebekah, and I am an alcoholic. Why do you think they start that way? Because they have to name what is going on in their life. They have to name it. Because once you name it, you can deal with it. So if we know that, if we know we have to name it, why do we not name it? Well, because it's hard. It's embarrassing. You feel dumb. You feel like nobody else is dealing with the things that you're dealing with. Or you still want to try to hide it. We try to hide our sin all the time. Abraham does this. I mean, all of us reading this story are like, I could point out this guy's flaws, hands down. He's a liar and he's afraid. In verse 2, it says, Abraham introduced his wife Sarah by saying, she is my sister. That's a lie. And we've seen him perpetually do that. Isn't that the funny thing about sin? It's perpetual. It's not like one day you just start doing these big, terrible things. No, you've perpetually done these things over and over and over in your life. Or fear. Abraham was afraid. He was afraid. In verse 11 it says, he goes back because Abimelech is like, I am so mad at you. What is wrong with you? Why have you done this to me? He says, Abraham says, I thought, this is a godless place. They all want my wife and will kill me to get her. Here's the problem. This is the scariest part of all, okay? Because again, he was living in fear. Instead of knowing, we know the beginning of this story is that God promised Abraham and Sarah that they would have a baby. So Abraham and Sarah are traveling, and he doesn't believe. He is afraid that God is not going to come through for him. Here's the scary part about our sin. No matter what it is, we always get caught. Always. It may take longer for some, or it may be quickly, but it always catches up with us. Numbers 32:23 says, but if you fail to keep your word, then you will have sinned against the Lord, and you may be sure that your sin will find you out. Every time we get caught. Or Luke 12:3 says, I think this one is really scary because a lot of sin happens in the dark. Whatever you have said in the dark will be heard in the light, and whatever you have whispered behind closed doors will be shouted from the housetops for all to hear. How many of you do not want anyone to know what you do in the dark? You don't have to raise your hands because honestly, I don't need to see. I don't want to know. Here's the thing. The Bible is really clear. When you sin against God, you will be caught. How many have ever done something wrong, gotten caught? Anybody? Yes? I can see it when my kids think I'm not listening and they are just being nasty to each other. Something happened all of a sudden when my girls turn like 8, 9, I don't know what to say. I feel like this next couple of years is going to be insane, like those, I don't know, the in-between years. So because Tom and I we love to sneak up on them and then scare them when they've done something terrible, because then they're just like, did you hear what I said? We're like, yeah, we heard the whole thing, and then we deal with it. So here's the thing, when you get caught, that look on your face is awful. God himself came to Abimelech. Abraham got caught. Here's the thing about getting caught, though. Does anybody feel this way? It can be the greatest and the most terrible moment all in one. I feel like there's a plethora of feelings and emotions. I love that word, by the way, plethora. It's perfect. Here's what happens with getting caught. It's a great moment and it's a terrible moment. You have that sinking feeling like, oh man, somebody knows. Somebody knows. And then you're like, oh my gosh, somebody knows. It's a beautiful relief when you get caught. Here's the thing. I would much rather get caught on my own terms. I don't want it to be shouted from the rooftops, quite frankly, my struggles. I don't want someone to stand on the roof and be like, this girl, you want to know? It comes out every time. So why not deal with it ahead of time? You get set free when you get caught. You find freedom in knowing that you're not carrying that burden alone anymore. So a lot of times we can't go all in because we don't name our sin, because we want to hide it. The other thing that we do is we rationalize our sin. I think that one's even worse. We rationalize. So Abraham, this is what he says. First of all, He knows he's caught. So this is verse 11. He says, I thought this is a godless place. And he says, they will want my wife and will kill me to get her. So this is what he says. Okay, here's the thing. At this point, Abraham should have just said to Abimelech, dude, I'm sorry. I was afraid you were going to kill me. I'm real sorry that I lied to you. This is what he said. He said, she really is my sister, for we both have the same father, but different mothers. First time I read that, I'm like, but that's what happened. And he said, then I married her. When God called me to leave my father's home and to travel from place to place, I told her, do me a favor, wherever we go, tell the people that I am your brother. So instead of just saying sorry, he rationalizes his sin. We do that all the time. If any of you have come from a really rough place in life, and I find this a lot, I do a lot of counseling, and I find the number one thing that people do when they know they're sinning, they've already named it. When they know they're sinning, they rationalize and say, well, look how far I've come. I'm not doing that anymore. Here's the thing. I am thrilled that people are not at the same place they were before. But if they're ever going to get to the place that God calls them, they have to just name it and be done and move on. When you rationalize it, you continually do it. If Abraham would have said, I'm sorry, this woman, if he would have trusted in God, and if he would have said, bottom line is, she's my wife. Do what you will. Abimelech would have been like, okay, she's your wife. I'll let her alone. But instead, he rationalized his sin because he was afraid. And he caused pain for everyone around him. The problem with us is that we want to sin. It's the internal struggle, the sin in our life, our nature that we were born with and lived with. We want to do it. When you have sex outside of marriage, you want to do it. Why? Because it's great. Let's be honest. You can, it's true. Doesn't make it okay to do it outside of marriage. I hear so many Christian couples that we counsel. We counsel so many Christian couples, and they're like, well, you know, everybody's doing it right now. It's not that big of a deal. It's a big deal. The bottom line is it's a big deal. If you are a Christian and you tell people that you're a Christian and you're on Facebook saying terrible things about people or swearing or going crazy about political stuff or in a nasty way, I think it's okay for us to express our opinion. But if you're telling everybody you're a Christian and your behavior does not match it, that's not okay. It's not all right to rationalize and say, well, it's not a big deal. I'm not cheating. It's not the big sin. The Bible says that coarse words and coarse language should not come out of our mouth. I didn't write the book. He did. Why does he do that? Because he knows that when we go there, it keeps us from him. Or maybe you don't do those things. Maybe you're not swearing at people on Facebook. Or maybe you're not doing the big ones. Maybe you look pretty pristine and awesome to everybody else, but you talk about people like crazy. Everybody knows they can come to you and tell you what's going on with everybody's business because they know that you'll talk about it. See, he knows somebody like that. We all know somebody like that, or maybe it's you. If everybody's coming to you about everything, you're that person. Maybe you look great on the outside, but that's keeping you from God. And we rationalize it because, they're just coming to me because I'm a good listening ear. They're just coming to me because they know that I'll help them through it. It's not biblical. Bible says go to that person that you have a problem with. Guys, I'm not saying that this is easy. It says that we are in constant struggle, in constant battle. It's hard. It's hard. But we rationalize our sin all the time because we don't want to go all in. All in means we don't have control anymore. All in means we have to give up the things that are comfortable or enjoyable to us. no one's saying it's fun, but the rewards on the other side are so amazing that they're not worth the little things that you're holding on to. So we rationalize things all the time. And the saddest part of all is when we rationalize, we are missing God's full blessing and glory. We talk about money. Everybody says churches shouldn't talk about money, but I think that everything is in the Bible for a reason. I think that God put things there for us. Everyone looks at God's guidelines as like this, he's so mean, there's all these rules, they're terrible. I don't know why. Why can't we just have fun? Why can't we do what we want? God put everything in there because he knows we need some rules. Lord knows if we didn't have rules, we would all be crazy and doing whatever it is that we want to do. Would you think for a second, if you were driving your car and you're driving on the highest mountain, wouldn't you kind of want a guardrail there? Wouldn't you want something to kind of protect you from falling off the edge and dying? That's what these rules are for. That's what they're there for. To keep us from ourselves and our human nature, to keep us from jumping off the edge. Because before you know it, you're not even paying attention. You're enjoying the joyride of driving up the mountain, and next thing you know, you're off the cliff. And you're like, how did I get here? I don't know how I got here. That happens all the time. Think about your darkest moment, and you think to yourself, how did I get here? The hard part is we rationalize and we hide our sin. That's how we get there. We say it's not that big of a deal. It is a big deal. It keeps us from the Lord. Number 2 way to cast everything aside is we have to believe that things can change. We have to believe that. Both Abraham and Sarah struggled immensely with disbelief because God came to Abraham when he was old and Sarah did not have any children yet, and he said, I'm going to birth the entire Israeli nation through you. And literally, Abraham fell on the floor and laughed in disbelief. And Sarah was outside the tent, and she laughed in like disgust, like, oh my gosh, God, you're an idiot. You got to be an idiot. Don't you know that I'm barren? Don't you know that I can't have children? How are you going to birth a nation? So she's laughing in God's face. Well, we go ahead to Genesis 21. Abraham was 100, and Sarah was 90, and they had a baby. Does anybody know what the baby's name was? Isaac. Right? Well, listen to this. Does anybody know what Isaac means? Yes, it means laughter. I think it's so ironic that they named him Laughter in the beginning. So in chapter 17, when God first tells Abraham and Sarah, they kind of laughed in God's face like, you are crazy. And then in chapter 21, they are laughing in sheer bliss. So when they have Isaac, they named him Isaac to remember their laughter. Here's the hard part. Oftentimes we are too afraid. We live in fear. We're too afraid to hope that life could be different. We're too afraid to think that we can change. We can change. Things don't happen on our own time. Boy, do I wish that they did. Thomas said it before. I'm like, God always seems to come in. If midnight is the deadline, he comes in at 11:59. Almost every time. And I'm like, God, please, even 11:55, give me a few more minutes. Like, I'd like a little. No, God does things on his own time. Maybe you're afraid to hope today. Maybe you are struggling with, you know what, this has been my life for so long, I don't know any different. I can't believe that I can actually change and put the hard work in and actually do what I should be doing. Maybe I can't do it. Genesis 18:14. Tom, is it on there? So Sarah is really, at this stage in the story, Sarah is really, really angry at God. And she's like, there's no way, God, you're not coming through. You told me you'd come through. And here's what God says to her. Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return about this time next year, and Sarah will have a son. God's saying, is anything too hard for me? How many of you women, if you were 90 years old, would say, she was 80, I'm 80 years old. Funny God, I'm not having a baby. Dear God, if God came down to me right now and said you're having a baby, I'd be like, no, she's not. No, God. She was 80. I would think it'd be pretty unbelievable, but God is saying to her, is anything too hard for the Lord? You know what he's saying? He wants you to hope today. He wants you to have wonder in the amazing God that he is, that he can and will come through for you. It said he knew you in your mother's womb. He had plans to prosper you, for life to be good, for you to do great things. He's called you to great things. If he says it, it can and will be done. But you have to believe. Maybe you're afraid to believe. Maybe you've lost your ability to hope. There are so many of us right now that sit here and say, life can't be different for me. This is how life was for my parents. This is how it was for the parents before him. This is how it is for all of my friends. It doesn't have to be that way. I'll never forget, my grandpa was a coal miner. And he was an awesome man, but he was very, very hard. My mom has 9 brothers and sisters, and he never showed any emotion. He grew up Catholic. My mom got saved when she was 18, and my mom prayed for my grandpa to be saved. For 20 years, she prayed for my grandpa. He was a hard man. We'd always pray for him. We'd pray for him at night. 20 years. And I remember my mom saying, God, if you can save my dad, you can save anyone. Well, flash forward to 25 years later. So for 20 years, I remember her praying that. 25 years later, my grandpa gets saved, and everything about him changed. All of a sudden, my grandpa, so in his mid-60s, starts campaigning for pro-life babies. I mean, out of nowhere. This is a harsh man that, like, when you cried, he would yell at you. When you showed any sort of emotion, he would yell at you. When he had 5 boys and 5 girls and didn't show any of them any affection. And here my 65-year-old grandfather, he had multiple bouts of cancer in his jaw and had most of his jaw removed. And he would be at pro-life rallies. And I will never forget, it was the last time I had dinner with my grandpa. We were driving in a car. His favorite place was Ryan's. It's a like old country buffet kind of place. And he gets all teary-eyed in the car, and he said, I wish that my kids knew how much I actually loved them. And my grandpa felt everything in him had changed. This angry man became so tender and sweet for unborn babies. No one would ever have expected Pap to be like that, ever. But God can do anything. My mom did not lose hope that my Pap could be saved. She didn't lose hope. It was hard year after year watching him not change. Year after year saying, God, how long? When are you going to work? When are you going to make this work? I have faithfully prayed for him every night. What would have happened if we would have quit? Maybe Pap wouldn't have gotten saved. Maybe Pap would not have given his last years to bring life to unborn babies, to bring light. This man campaigned. I don't know about you, but I cannot lose hope that people in my life can change. I cannot lose hope that I can change. I can get through the things in my life. I can name my sin and change them. I can. There's hope in the Lord. If we would have given up, maybe Pap wouldn't have changed. And the final thing I want to talk to you about this morning is we have to live out the new and not the old. We can't hide our sin. We have to name it. We have to believe that things can change in our lives and the people's lives around us. And we have to live out the new life and not the old. Ephesians 4:24 says, put on your new nature, created to be like God, truly righteous and holy. We have to put on we have to put on the new man. That sounds awesome. It sounds great to say, put on your new nature, because we're created like God to be true, righteous, and holy. Sounds good, right? Well, how do you do it? I hate to break it to you, but there's no magic formula. You can't drink a potion. You can't take a pill. You can't just say, God, wipe all this stuff away from me. You know what it is? It's in your choice by choice. Every decision that you make, minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, month by month, year by year, that is how you put on the new man. You have to become new every morning. Every choice you make. Do you think all the athletes in the world, they just one day woke up, and Michael Jordan one day woke up and he was the greatest basketball player of all times? No. There's no magic formula for success. There's no magic formula for being who God created you to be. It's in your everyday choices. We have to continually take action. If you don't continually make action, you will become the old man every single time. And 6 months from now, if you don't make those choices, the right choices day after day, 6 months from now, you're going to be saying to yourself, how did I get here? You got here because of the small choices that you make. Those choices, the simple choices when you're in the car and somebody cuts you off. That choice in that moment that you make, that's putting on the new man. Or when, for me, I lose my mind when I'm in the grocery store with my children and the people in front of me are slow. I'm like, I got places to be, hurry it up. I get cranky, I'm angry. That choice, I have to make that choice. It's when you struggle with alcoholism and you're like, I'm going to go to that party anyway because I just want to be with my friends. No! You don't go to the party because you're not strong enough to not take that sip. And guess what? It's all right to not be strong enough. It's okay. We have to put on the new man. It's the decisions that we make. It's the words that come out of our mouth. It's that spending time with God. It's 15 minutes. If you don't do your devotions, I promise you, you're not going to be close to God. You can know all the stuff in your head, but if you don't spend the time to make the choice, it doesn't just magically happen. You don't just magically become what God called you to be. It requires work. But what I do promise you is if you make those choices, it will be great. My husband, if you were to ask anybody in his high school what Tom would be doing as a career, I would promise you, pastor would not be on the list. Not only would people never guess it, it was not even on their radar whatsoever. My favorite is when we go back home, there's he grew up kind of a small town near Pittsburgh, and they always have you guys ever been to carnivals that have the fire hall carnivals where it's just a big deal and everybody goes? So my favorite is when people are like, Tommy, how you doing? What are you doing now? And he's like, well, I'm pastor. And they're like, no, you're not. What are you really doing? No, that's my job. Totally do it. That's what I do. I love seeing their faces. I love it. Do you know why he's a pastor now? Because of the choices that he made. He said no more. All of the crazy... Tom and I live totally different lives. I grew up in a pastor's house. I was a goody two-shoes. Let's just say it. I hardly did anything outwardly terrible. Here's the thing, and I'm not saying that to say there's a whole lot of mess that I have to deal with. There's a lot of things in my life that I don't trust God for, and I need to. But when I look at him, it's because of the daily choices that he made and that he continues to make. Being a Christian is hard for him. It's hard for me. It's hard for all of us that have been doing it a long time. So if you feel like you've only been doing it for a short time and it's really hard, welcome to the club. It's a good club to be in. Because when you have church family, we all get to do it together. We don't have to struggle on our own. This is what I love about God. In Romans 8:2 it says, and because you belong to him, The power of the life-giving Spirit has freed you from the power of sin that leads to death. We no longer have to be stuck in our sin. We get today, we think that we get saved. When we get saved, we get to go to heaven, but we forget the other part. It frees us from death and sin. I'd like to pray over you this morning. Father, I thank you for each person that's in this room. I thank you, God, that we feel no condemnation in you, Lord, and we just ask in your name that we would start feeling your life-giving peace. That the battle that goes on in all of us day after day, maybe even minute after minute, God, that the battle that goes on, that we would start fighting the right fight. That we would stop going back to our old man, that we would stop going backwards and we would start moving forward, God. We are going to struggle in life. You never promised it would be easy. So, Father, help us to struggle towards what is good and what is better for us and what brings us hope and what brings us life. Father, I ask for peace this morning. I pray that you would give people the courage to name their sin and to move forward and not look back. If you're sitting here this morning and you know your struggle and you just need to say it to the Lord this morning so you can start making that right decision, I'd like you to raise your hand. The first step is to raise your hand and name what you're struggling with. You don't have to say it out loud. This is between you and the Lord this morning. So if you're struggling with the sin and you know what it is and you want to take the first step to say, God, I'm struggling with this. I need you to help me. If that's you today, just raise your hand and take the first step between you and the Lord this morning. Father, you see those hands. You see that today they want to take the first step and say, God, I struggle in this area and I need you. Lord, I pray that you would help them not hide anymore from their sin, God, that they would talk to you and to someone about getting free, Father. And Lord, for those of you in this room today that maybe you kind of know your sin, it doesn't feel like a big deal, but you struggle with just rationalizing what you're doing. Everybody does it. I do it. If you're here today and you say, I don't want to rationalize my sin anymore. I want to say, Lord, here it is. I don't want to compartmentalize and say everything's okay when it isn't. If that's you today, I want you to say, Father, I'm giving it to you. I'm not going to rationalize my sin. I'm going to call it what it is. I'm going to say this is a sin and I need to move forward from it. If that's you today, raise your hand just between you and God. I'm not going to look around. No one else is looking around. It's between you and the Lord. Father, I pray that you would bless each hand that goes up today. Lord, I pray that we would start making the right choices. That we would go all in, God, to see what you have for us on the other side, that we don't have to live life this way anymore. I pray that you would move in our hearts today. I pray that you would help us and compel us to do the right thing, Father. We love you, Lord. Help us not to give up hope. In your precious name we pray. Amen. Amen. Thank you guys so much for coming. We love that you're a part of our lives and a part of our family. If you're new today, don't forget to get your t-shirt in the back. If you want to talk to Tom or I, if you would need prayer, we're here. Love you guys. Thanks for coming.
You are listening to Rescue Community Church. For more information, check us out at www.rescue.cc.